Have you ever practiced English until your ears felt stuffed? Your mouth felt stiff like it didn't even belong to you, and you wondered whether you were truly capable or just clinging to a dream that was never meant for you. But then, in the exact moment I wanted to give up the most here in Denmark, I realized something strange. My mother's unspoken love was the very thing that saved me and helped me speak my first real English sentences. Silent Love Seeds English version. Imagine standing in the old kitchen of your childhood, where the ceiling fan made that clack-clack sound like it was complaining about life, and suddenly you realize your mother taught you your first language without using words. It wasn't English, and it wasn't even your native tongue. It was that strange language only actions can speak. Your brain back then probably wasn't mature enough to understand it, but your body remembers every detail. The bowl of rice she always placed on your left side, the jacket she wrapped around you on rainy nights, and the soft click of the door each time she woke up 3 hours earlier just to prepare for a day you believed was normal. The funny thing is, the human brain has a habit of making familiar things invisible. Scientists call it habituation. When you see something too often, your brain pushes it into the background. And a mother's love? Yes, it gets filed under background too. So as a kid, you never thought of it as silent love. You just thought, well, she does that because she's mom. But then you grow up. You leave home. You move to Denmark, a place so cold it freezes your thinking. And English suddenly becomes something you have to use every day like oxygen, but not free at all. And that's when those seeds of love your mother planted, wordless, quiet, unexplainable, begin to sprout in your memory. I remember one morning when I was little. My mother didn't say, "Be strong." She just placed her hand on my shoulder for 1 second, then handed me a warm lunchbox. 1 second. But the human brain, ironically, stores the shortest moments longer than the longest lectures. Psychologists call this emotional tagging. When a simple action carries enough emotion to become a permanent marker in your memory. And now, standing in my tiny room in Copenhagen, wrestling with English sounds that refused to behave, I suddenly realized all those silent moments were her way of teaching me patience, attention, and how to understand the world with my heart instead of my voice. Before I learned any language, I had already learned how to listen to love. A kind of love that whispers, saying nothing yet saying everything. Denmark's Quiet Winter English version. Picture this. You step outside in Denmark for the first time, and the cold doesn't just bite. It negotiates aggressively with your soul. The wind slaps your face like it's reminding you that you are, in fact, a foreigner. And in that strange icy silence, you suddenly hear something you never noticed back home. The absence of your mother's presence. It's louder than the wind, louder than the language you can't speak, louder than every mistake waiting to embarrass you. There's a peculiar thing about loneliness. It doesn't always appear as an emotion. Sometimes it shows up in everyday moments, like when you're trying to buy bread and the cashier fires off a Danish phrase that sounds like someone dropping cutlery down a metal staircase. Your brain panics, your tongue forgets it has muscles, and your confidence evaporates faster than boiling water in Copenhagen's winter air. Scientists call this cognitive overload, but let's be honest. It's just your nervous system throwing a tiny, dramatic tantrum. And that's the moment you start missing home in a way that feels almost physical. Not the house. Not the neighborhood. Just your mother walking behind you, quietly making things less frightening. She didn't need to speak to hold your world together. She simply existed like gravity, silent, reliable, taken for granted until the moment you float away from Denmark. Everything feels louder because your inner world is quieter. And when you're struggling with English, when every word feels like stepping on ice that might crack under you, that quiet becomes unbearable. You start doubting everything. Your ability, your purpose, even your decision to chase something better. Your mind whispers questions you don't want to answer. Why is this so hard? Why can't I be like everyone else who speaks English effortlessly? Did I overestimate myself? But here's the twist your brain doesn't expect. Language learning isn't just about sound waves and grammar rules. It's about identity. When you can't express yourself, you feel smaller, weaker, dimmer, as if someone turned down the volume of your entire existence. Neuroscientists say that when you lose a familiar linguistic environment, your emotional regulation dips. Translation: being in a foreign country makes your feelings act like toddlers without supervision. And in that deep Danish winter silence, you realize something powerful. The reason English feels impossible isn't because you lack talent. It's because you lost the invisible support system your mother created. Her routines, her presence, her quiet stabilizing energy. Without her, every sound in English feels heavier. But that realization, strangely enough, becomes the first crack of warmth in the cold. Understanding that your struggle isn't a failure. It's homesickness wrapped in language. And maybe, just maybe, learning English is the first step toward building a new kind of home within yourself. A letter never sent, English version. There's something strangely terrifying about writing a letter you know you'll never send. Feels like standing in front of a mirror that finally talks back. One night in Denmark, while the radiator clicked like it was shivering with me, I opened my laptop and started typing a message to my mother. A message she was never supposed to read. Not because it was dark or dramatic, but because it felt like admitting a truth I didn't want spoken out loud. I was scared. Scared of failing. Scared of disappointing her. Scared that maybe I wasn't built for the version of life I was trying so hard to chase. The letter started simple. Mom, learning English is harder than I expected. But the next line refused to come out clean. It tangled itself around every insecurity I had. Every moment I froze in a conversation. Every time I mispronounced a word and felt my cheeks burn. Every situation that made me feel like a glitching robot among fluent humans. Psychologists have a name for this. Linguistic self-doubt. It's basically the brain's way of saying, hey, let's catastrophize everything just for fun. I wrote about the day I tried to ask my classmate a question, but instead of speaking, I just opened my mouth like a confused goldfish. I wrote about the supermarket cashier who switched to English for me, but I still couldn't understand because my brain was buffering like old Wi-Fi. And I wrote about how every failure made me feel further from home, as if each mistake stretched the distance between Denmark and my mother a little more. The truth was, I wasn't only afraid of English. I was afraid of losing the version of myself she loved, the capable one, the determined one, the one she believed would do great things abroad. It's funny how love makes you braver in theory but more fragile in reality. Neuroscientists say social expectations can heighten performance anxiety, especially in foreign language environments. Translation: trying not to disappoint your mom makes your tongue forget how to cooperate. As I typed, I realized something quietly painful. The reason I struggled wasn't because I lacked skill. It was because I carried the pressure of wanting to make her proud in every syllable I spoke. And that weight made even simple English feel heavy that I never sent the letter. I closed the laptop, wiped my eyes and whispered something into the dark. Something my mother would never hear but somehow already knew. I'm trying harder than you think. And for the first time that felt like enough. Learning to hear love, English version. Imagine sitting alone in your tiny Danish room, the kind where the walls feel so close they might as well be hugging you out of pity, and suddenly realizing that learning English is a lot like understanding the way your mother loved you. Not loud, not obvious, not wrapped in grand speeches, more like background music you didn't notice until the day it stopped playing. It's strange how your brain works. It ignores the quiet things until the quiet becomes the only thing you hear. There's a scientific term for this: retrospective illumination. It means you only understand certain experiences when you look back at them under different light. And Denmark, with its long silent winters and evenings where even the street feels like it's whispering, gave me the perfect lighting to notice something I had missed for years. My mother spoke a language without sound, and I had spent my whole childhood learning to interpret it. Suddenly, English didn't seem like the enemy anymore. It just felt unfamiliar the way my mother's love once had. Every time I struggled to catch a sentence, I remembered how many years it took me to understand that when she placed fruit on my desk, it wasn't about nutrition. It was her saying, "I see you trying." When she hovered in the doorway pretending to look for something, it wasn't because she forgot. She was checking if I was okay without embarrassing me. Love, like language, hides in the little things. And that's when a surprising thought hit me. Maybe I wasn't bad at listening. Maybe I just wasn't listening the right way. Maybe English required the same patience my mother had used with me. Slow, steady, forgiving. The kind of attention that isn't rushed. The kind that doesn't panic when something doesn't make sense right away. Psychologists say the brain learns faster when it feels safe. Maybe that's why I improved more in the moments I stopped judging myself and simply listened. Not for perfection. Not for performance. Just listened the way I used to listen for my mother's footsteps in the kitchen. Subtle, comforting, real. It turns out, love teaches you how to hear long before any language ever does. And once you learn to hear love, hearing English suddenly becomes a little less impossible. The market mistake, English version. There's a special kind of humiliation that only happens in foreign supermarkets. The kind that makes you want to teleport straight into the produce section and disappear behind the potatoes. One cold Saturday morning in Denmark, I walked into a local market thinking, okay, today I will speak English confidently. And of course, that's exactly when the universe said, "Great, let's make this interesting." I pointed at a bag of apples and asked the vendor, "How much is this?" He smiled, nodded, and replied in Danish. Not slow Danish. Not friendly Danish. But the kind of Danish that sounded like he swallowed a handful of consonants and decided to cough them directly at me. My brain froze. Completely. It didn't even attempt to translate. It just panicked like someone pressed Ctrl+Alt+Delete on my entire linguistic system, so I did what any overwhelmed foreigner would do. I nodded confidently, way too confidently, and said, "Yes." He looked at me like I had just agreed to buy the entire apple farm. Turns out he had asked, "Do you want 10 kilos?" I had agreed to 10 kilos. Psychologists call this a freeze response, part of the fight-flight-freeze cycle. But let's be honest, this wasn't freezing. This was my nervous system packing up its bags and leaving the scene. While he loaded bag after bag of apples onto the counter, I felt the embarrassment rising like steam. My cheeks burned. My palms sweated. My brain started filing a complaint. Why is English still so hard? Why can't I understand simple conversations? Why does this keep happening to me? And then, like a memory pushed through the door of my mind, came the image of my mother teaching me how to peel an apple when I was small. She didn't use words. She just guided my hands slowly, patiently, even when I messed it up again and again. Her silence wasn't pressure. It was permission to fail safely. Standing in that market, holding way too many apples, I realized. She never rushed me. She never made me feel stupid for not getting things right the first time. And maybe that was exactly what I needed to borrow in that moment. A bit of her patience, her quiet acceptance, her calm. So instead of spiraling, I took a breath, returned half the apples, and managed to say in imperfect but brave English, "Sorry, I misunderstood." Was it flawless? No. Did the vendor judge me? Probably not. And even if he did, it didn't matter. Because for the first time, I wasn't trying to be perfect, I was just trying to be present. Borrowed courage, English version. There's a strange moment in every immigrant's life when you realize you're basically borrowing courage the same way you once borrowed sugar from neighbors. Quietly, awkwardly, and hoping no one notices how desperately you need it. For me, that moment came on a windy weekday in Denmark, when the sky looked like someone had erased all the color and forgotten to put it back. I was standing outside my language school, clutching my notebook like it was a life jacket, terrified to walk in because I knew I'd have to speak. Not listen, not read, speak. The word alone made my stomach twist like it was practicing yoga without my consent. But then the weirdest memory floated in, my mother standing behind me when I was a child, encouraging me to order food at a crowded street stall back home. She didn't tell me what to say. She didn't correct me. She didn't hover. She simply stood there, steady as a pillar, like her presence alone gave my voice permission to exist, so I decided to borrow that presence. Psychologists call this emotional scaffolding, using a memory of safety to support your performance in a stressful moment. And honestly, it works better than caffeine, affirmations, or pretending to be confident while your soul evaporates. I pictured her beside me in that Danish hallway, not saying anything because she never needed words, just giving that small nod she always gave, the one that meant you're capable. Go try. And suddenly the fear didn't vanish, but it softened. It became manageable, like background noise instead of a siren. Inside the classroom, the teacher asked us to introduce ourselves in English. Normally my brain would have thrown a tantrum, staged a walkout, or silently died. But this time something surprising happened. I heard myself say, "Hi, my name is," and the sentence didn't fall apart. It wobbled, sure. It wasn't elegant, but it was mine. My voice carrying my mother's borrowed courage across an entire continent. For the first time, speaking English didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like learning to ride a bike again, with someone steadying the back, even if only in memory. And maybe that's the secret no one tells you. Sometimes bravery isn't yours. Sometimes it's inherited. And sometimes that's more than enough. Her unspoken lesson, English version. Have you ever realized that the most important lessons in life often come without a single word being spoken? That's exactly what I discovered during my months struggling to speak English in Denmark. I had been chasing grammar rules, pronunciation drills, and vocabulary lists like a marathon runner, obsessed with every step. Yet somehow I kept tripping over my own expectations. Then, like a quiet whisper in the middle of chaos, I remembered my mother. Not her words, but her actions. When I was small, she never gave long lectures about patience or resilience. She didn't say, You must work hard. Instead, she baked bread every morning, folded laundry, and made sure I had what I needed before I even knew I wanted it. Her lesson was embedded in daily life. Consistency beats intensity, presence beats perfection, love beats instruction. Neuroscientists call this implicit learning, when the brain absorbs information from repeated patterns without conscious effort. My mother was a master teacher long before I had a term for it. Now, standing in my Danish classroom, struggling with English pronunciation, I realized her methods applied here too. I didn't need to memorize every idiom or fear every mistake. I needed presence, patience, and subtle consistency. Just like she had taught me without speaking, I could practice English by immersing myself in it daily, listening carefully, repeating slowly, and giving myself permission to fail without judgment. One afternoon, I made a mistake reading aloud in class. Instead of panicking, I remembered how she would calmly guide my hands when I struggled to tie my shoes or draw a straight line. I corrected myself, smiled, and tried again. The anxiety that had loomed for months shrank a little. Her lesson wasn't about avoiding errors. It was about persistence, mindfulness, and quiet confidence. By learning to embrace her unspoken guidance, I began to see English not as an enemy, but as a companion. Each misstep was just another brushstroke in a larger painting. Each awkward sentence a rehearsal for fluency. My mother's silent lesson, small, consistent, loving, had prepared me for this moment. And the irony? I never realized it at the time, but everything I needed to conquer fear, build confidence, and speak English clearly had been modeled in my childhood. Love, patience, and presence, they were the blueprint all along. The love I speak now, English version. Imagine standing in a quiet Copenhagen cafe. The kind where the espresso machine hisses like it's sighing in sympathy, and realizing that for the first time, your English words are carrying more than grammar, they're carrying love. I remember the exact moment I ordered a coffee, and instead of stammering or repeating myself, the sentence flowed. Not perfectly but clearly. Not loudly but confidently. And in that moment I understood something profound. This wasn't just English. It was a bridge connecting the quiet lessons my mother taught me across continents, through years, into a voice I finally trusted. I had spent months thinking that fluency meant flawless pronunciation, perfect sentence structure, and zero hesitation. But here I was speaking imperfectly and still being understood, because language isn't just a system of rules. It's a vessel for connection. Every thank you, every please, every simple question I voiced carried fragments of my mother's patience, her consistency, her unspoken support. Neuroscientists explain that emotional memory enhances language acquisition. When words are tied to feelings, the brain retains them more effectively. And for me, those feelings were rooted in love. As I sipped the coffee, I remembered the early mornings when she placed a warm lunchbox on my desk, the quiet evenings when she adjusted my jacket without saying a word, and the countless times she let me fail safely, learning slowly at my own pace. Those memories weren't just nostalgia, they were tools. They had trained my mind to persevere, my heart to stay calm, and my voice to find courage in uncertainty. Now when I speak English, I am not just practicing a language, I am honoring that love. Each sentence is a reminder that growth is possible even in discomfort, that patience can outlast fear, and that silent encouragement can speak louder than the harshest criticism. Learning English slowly, deliberately, with attention and care, became a meditation, a way to embody the very lessons my mother had always lived. So, if you ever feel lost, frustrated, or ready to give up while learning a language, remember this. The love and lessons embedded in your past, even the quiet, unspoken ones, can become the courage that carries you forward. Today, my words carry more than meaning. They carry her love, guiding me steady and real.